Hello. Today we're going to be making a Smash Bros. Wall Slam VFX. The effect looks like this, and we'll need a few things before we get started. So we'll need an image editor. I'm going to be using Photoshop, but you can also use GIMP as a free alternative. We'll also need a sprite sheet plugin. The one I'm going to be using is from John Wordsworth, and it's free. I'll link it in the description. We'll also need a 3D modeling program. I'm going to be using Blender. And in the end, we're going to tie all of it together in Unity. So let's get started. Okay, so in Blender, I'm going to delete all of our starting stuff, hit Shift A, go to Mesh, go to Cylinder. The default cylinder is fine. We want to go to Edit Mode, hit GZ1. And that's going to put our pivot point of the cylinder at the bottom. So when we rotate it in Unity, it'll be nicely lined up with any surface that our character might be bouncing off. Next, we want to get rid of the top face. You can delete faces. Delete faces. And then we want to select this edge and do mark seam, and that'll make it so that when we unwrap this, it'll be nicely all connected in one strip. After that, we want to hit A, then Shift D to duplicate. You can see there's two. And if you right click, it'll put that right back in the same spot. Then before this gets confusing, we want to go to the vertex groups here. This little green triangle. And we're going to add a vertex group. We're going to call it inner and assign those. Then hit F3. We're going to hide selected. Hit L to select the other one. And then we're going to add another vertex group. Call it outer. Then we're going to assign those. And if all of this worked correctly, when we hit F3 and we reveal hidden, we should now be able to unselect everything, select inner, and move it. That's working. And if we go select outer, same thing. So now we have a great way to select both of them. Undo that till they're on top of each other again. Now we're going to go up to this menu here, little guy, and down to the normals, and we're going to display normals. You get these little blue ticks, and this is telling you what part of this object is going to render. So if I looked inside of this with a single render in Unity, it would be invisible right now. So what we want is for the inner tube to only display inside and the outer to display outside. So all you have to do is select inner, hit F3, and then search normals, and you'll see here flip. And there you go. So you've got the inner normals pointing in and the outer normals pointing out. Next, we want to unwrap these. So press A, and F3, and unwrap. And then down here in the unwrap menu, make sure your margin's at 0. And then we're going to go over to the UV editor. So that 0 margin makes it so that this is nice and flush with the edge of the image. We need that because we're going to wrap an image across this seam. So when this repeats in Photoshop, it needs to be flush. We're going to come up here and we're going to synchronize the selection between this menu and this menu. That's going to be really helpful going forward. Before we start laying these UVs out, it's important for us to know which one is the inner and which one is the outer. So if we go to our vertex groups and we select the inner, we can see that this strip is the inner UV. Let's start putting these UVs into place. So if you come up to the edge selector here and we Alt left click on this edge, we can see that that's the top edge. So what we're going to want to do is grab the face selector, hit L, and we're going to rotate 90 degrees so that the top edge is on top. Then we're going to hit N to bring this menu up, and we're going to set the X to 0.5. Now, since this is the inner, we want it to cover the whole texture. So if you edge select and then Alt left click on this edge, and then we move this to 1 on the Y, and we do the same, Alt left click down here, move this to 0 on the Y. With that done, if you select the inner vertex group, you can see it's covering the entire image. Next, we're going to grab this edge, and that is the bottom edge of the outer. So let's grab the outer, and then we're going to rotate this left, so R negative 90 degrees. And then we're going to put it in the center, so 0.5 on the X, 0.5 on the Y. And then we want this to be the full image size, but we only want to use half of it. So we're going to move the vertices of each edge, so top edge, in the same way. So 1 on the Y, and then bottom edge 0 on the Y. But then we're going to grab the whole outer, and we're going to move it up so 1 on the Y, so that half of it isn't being used. So we're really only using this bottom portion of it. And that's because if you imagine an image laid across this, these are the boundaries of the image, and we're going to have some spikes going like this. If this is the outside of the cylinder, spikes are going to end up sort of at the bottom here for the outer, but they're going to cover most of all the way up to the top for the inner. So that's going to give you a really high effect in the back and a low effect in the front, revealing the character no matter where you look at this from. Next, we're going to make some bones. So go to object mode, hit Shift A, armature, then hit Z, go to wireframe mode, go to the side view, select the bone, then go to edit mode, select the middle of the bone, hit Shift D, and then Z, and move the bone so that the base of the bone is right at the top of that cylinder there. Then go to the hierarchy here, and we're going to call the bottom bone bottom, and the top bone top. Next, we're going to go to object mode, select the model, and then the armature in that order. Then hit Control P. We're going to parent with empty groups. Then unselect, select the armature, then the model. Go to edit mode. And then in this little green triangle here, we're going to make some more vertex groups. So we want the bottom, which if you select, you can see that's empty. There's no vertices. We want the bottom bone to be assigned to all these bottom vertices here. So assign those. And then the top, we want to be assigned to all the top vertices. And assign those. And that should do it for our bones. Switch over to solid mode. And if you go to object mode, select the armature, pose mode, should see this. So that's going to let us flare the effect out and do all the animations we need to do with it. Okay, we're almost done here. Switch over to object mode, and we're going to do one last little rotation trick. So in order to get our rotation at 0, 0, 0 in Unity, we actually need to get it to be at 90x in Blender. So to do that, we're going to take the armature, rotate R, X, negative 90, And then we're going to hit Control A, apply rotation, RX positive 90. And then click on the mesh, and we want to clear this. So Control A, apply rotation. So now you should have the mesh at 0, 0, 0 and the armature at positive 90. And this is going to come out in Unity with both of them at 0, 0, 0. I don't know why this is exactly, but it works. Last thing we're going to do is unselect all, select the mesh, hit F3, shade smooth. That's going to hide all those polys. Then we want to select everything and go to save as, call it whatever you want, and then export FBX. And then in these settings, you want to limit to selected, change apply scalings to FBX all, and apply unit. You can uncheck that. If you don't do this, you're going to end up with 100, 100, 100 scale in Unity instead of 1, 1, 1, 1. And that's it. We're going to export the FBX, and then we're going to head over to Photoshop. In Photoshop, we're going to make a new image that's 1024 by 1024. Then we're going to change the background color to a gray, hit G. Then we're going to add a new layer, go to View, New Guide, set it to horizontal, 50%. And that's going to give us a pretty good idea of where our inner and outer UVs are going to lay out on this image. So in a moment, we're going to make a series of spikes like this. But before we do that, we want to know how dense do these spikes have to be, because it's sort of hard to tell how much this is going to get distorted when it wraps around the cylinder. So let's take a look at our reference. It's a little hard to find a super clear frame where you can count these, but I think this one's pretty good. So let's count that outer blue one. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I want to say there's one in there. 7, 8, 9. Guessing there's one back here. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So roughly 18, 20. So let's shoot for around there. Okay, so now that we know it's about 18, 20 points, grab the pen tool here and let's get started. So on layer 1, we want to start making points. We're going to start above this line. So we're going to come in here from our first point, pretty narrow, and we're not going to click and drag for the up points, but when we come down, we want to click and drag like this. And you want this arm to be pointing at where you're going to put your next point. It doesn't have to be exact, but things can get a little funky, you can see. It's not really pointing up if you don't go along this line. So we're going to aim to do that. The other thing I noticed about the effect is that it sort of has little spikes that build up to a much larger spike, almost like you're going up a mountain. So we're just going to continue along like this for a bit. So if you get to the end of the image and you find yourself not having enough points, so I have 12 here, one thing you can do is grab this here, click and hold, direct selection tool, drag, select everything, and then you can hit Control T and you can just scale it back a little. So we have 12 points and we need to add 18, or we need to have 18, so we need roughly 6 or maybe 20, so maybe 8 more. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So that's a little tight still. put it back a little further. Maybe right there. And we'll just add the rest of the points here. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 points. That should do it. Now, we want to make sure that this wraps around seamlessly. So we want these to end at the same height. So let's just make a new layer, double click that slowly, call it guide. And then I just like to do this. It's a little easier, I find, than making a guide by percent. So grab a red color. You can use the brush tool or the pencil tool. I'm going to use the pencil tool. And then you just draw a line, hold shift, and if that'll make it perfectly straight, draw a line across like this. And then we can use our navigator here to zoom in a little bit. And we're just going to grab with the selection tool these points, and we're going to pull them around a little bit so that this comes off the image at roughly the same place. It's going to be really small, so it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but we want it pretty close. So, and it'd be good too if we could get this loop in here, because that'll make it look a little bit more convincing. And then we'll just do a few final adjustments here. Once we're done with all that, we're going to grab the pen tool again, and we're just going to seal this path up. So you can just take a roundabout way. Just make sure you're covering the whole bottom of the image. And then we can get rid of our guide layer. We don't need, actually we'll keep it. But we can hide it for now. And then go to our layer 1. We can call this effect shape. And then if we go to paths and we do fill path, we're going to get a big white explosion shape. After that, we want to grab the magic wand here. Click to select all of this. Grab the gradient tool, which if you click and hold is under the bucket tool. Go to the gradient color. Make sure this is white on the left. And then for the right color, you want a 73% brightness total gray. Hit OK. And then we're going to hold shift. Going to come from the top down to about here. That'll give us a nice gradient. So first double click your background layer, and that'll allow you to hide that. And then make sure guide is hidden. And then we're going to save this as a Photoshop file. I'm going to call it Shockwave VFX texture. And it's good to just keep Photoshop files around, but I'm also going to save this as a PNG for our project, and that's also going to be called Shockwave VFX texture. Now we just need to make the animation for the particle effect that goes above the character. So make a new image, and we're going to do 512 by 512. And call it half Starburst animated. So before we start animating, let's take a better look at our effect. You can see right at the moment when Kirby impacts the ground, there's this pretty large kind of half Starburst effect going on that's almost wrapped around him, and it's always facing the camera. It's definitely a particle effect, and it's animated. So let's see how many frames it is. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's gone. So it's really fast and it's pretty large. Back in Photoshop, let's start by giving ourselves another gray background. Then we'll make a new layer. And this will just be 1, that'll be frame 1. And then we're going to go to Window. If you don't have this open already, you can go to Timeline, and you'll get this. And then you want to create a frame animation. Next, we're going to change a couple settings here. So come over to this drop down. We're going to check off create new layers for each new frame. And if this is checked, you're going to uncheck it, which is new layers visible in all frames. So after looking at that effect and seeing how large it's going to get, I think it's probably a good idea if we go to image size, and we double our image size, just to give us a little bit more room to expand. Okay, so now we're going to create some guides to animate around. So first, make a new layer, call it player guide, and then if you come up here, grab the elliptical marquee tool, go to view, new guide. We're going to make a vertical guide at 50%, hold shift, make a relatively small circle at the bottom here, press G, grab a red, fill that, and then set the opacity to around half or so. Then we're going to click to deselect and grab our pen tool, select your first layer here, zoom in a little bit, and then we're going to start drawing our shape out here. Once you're feeling pretty good about the path that you set up, you can go ahead and save that as frame 1 path. And then if we go to our layers and we're on frame 1, we want to fill this path with a bright white for now. Okay, now the next 2 frames are sort of just a scaled up version of this path. So if you make a new frame down here, and then we hide our frame 1, and go to paths, grab our path, we can duplicate this path and call it frame 2 path. And now we will still have the frame 1 path if we want to make adjustments, but we can start pulling the frame 2 path around. And generally we're just going to make it kind of go out a little bit in the directions it's already headed, trying to make it a little bit bigger and moving the whole thing away from the character just a little bit. Now, if you made any changes to the first frame, you want to make sure that you clear that and fill it. So make sure you deselect your paths on this menu, and then you can delete layer 1, get new layer, frame 1, and we're just gonna fill these in. So path, fill, and then frame 2, select frame 2, layer 2, and path 2, fill, and 3, same thing. Okay, and we just want to deactivate layer 2 here. There you go. Now, we're going to start drawing the next frame. If you make a new frame, I'll make a new layer for you, and we're going to start drawing the next frame with the third frame on, but at a low opacity so we can see where we were last time. Now, in this frame, the explosion's starting to break apart a little bit. So we want to trace roughly around where we were, but we want to start to sort of disintegrate some of this. Then we just want to fill frame 4. And then we're going to add another frame. And this is the last frame, frame 5. We're going to deactivate what we would call the onion skin in animation, which is that transparent version of the last frame. And we're going to create a new onion skin by reducing the 4th frame on the 5th frame. And then we're going to draw our last path out, which is very broken up, just a few shards left of the effect. So after you have 5 frames done, you should have something roughly like this. Now, I know we're going to have a couple extra spaces on our sprite sheet when we're done here, so I'm not really liking the way this is ending. So I'm going to add a couple extra frames just to flesh that ending out a little bit more. With those last 2 frames done, I'm pretty happy with the animation. So we're going to export this now. First, you want to deactivate your player guide and your background. Make sure the background's deactivated in all the frames. And then we're going to use our script. If you didn't install this script at the beginning of the video, there's a link. So go ahead and install that. This is a sprite sheet generator. We're going to choose 4096 by 2048. And source is going to be frame animation. And that should be good. When that's done, you should come out with something like this. If you notice any of these are out of order or anything like that, just make sure that you have at least 1 frame or at least 1 layer activated on each frame. Even the last empty frame, you need an empty layer, otherwise this will get screwed up. Now we're gonna save a high resolution copy of this, but I think this is a little overkill, so we're also gonna save a half resolution copy. So half Starburst animated sprite sheet full res. And then we're gonna go to image size, and we're gonna change this to 2048. That should auto adjust the height. Then we're gonna save as half Starburst animated. It's gonna be a PNG sprite sheet half res. Alright, we're finally in Unity. So first thing you want to do is grab each of your textures here and turn them into a sprite, apply, and that'll just allow them to have a transparent background. Okay, now we're gonna make a new game object. So game object create empty, and we're gonna call that wall slam VFX. And you could ignore the rest of the stuff in my hierarchy. That's from my project, and you don't need to worry about that. We're gonna set this to 0, 0, 0. Hit F after highlighting it, and that'll center us on it. And then we're gonna drag out our 2-sided shockwave cylinder. We're gonna set that to 0, 0, 0. And then we're going to parent it by dragging it on top of the wall slam VFX. Now those are connected. See, we're going to make this into a prefab by dragging it into our folder with our other things here. Then we're gonna right click on our library, go to create material. We're gonna call this shockwave. And then set the rendering mode to cut out. Drag our shockwave image into the albedo. And then let's drag this onto our cylinder here. And already you can see we've got roughly the effect we were hoping for. Just short wave in the bottom here in the front and a big kind of wave in the back there. The Smash Bros effect has 3 of these active at one time, so we're just going to copy and paste a couple more of these so that when we're animating we'll be able to have the same kind of effect. Select the Wall Slam VFX parent object, then go to Window, Animation, Animation, and then we're going to create a new animation. We're going to call it Wall Slam Animation. And then we want to start by making sure this is roughly the scale of one of our characters. So whatever character you want this to fit around, get one of those out. For me, I'm going to use the cow in our game Rolling Rogues. And I'm going to put it right in the center of the effect here. Getting its feet where the ground would be. Here we go. Maybe I'll give it a little tilt just to get the full effect. Okay. Now, first frame, we want to make sure, if we hit the record button here, that these two effects are not visible. So we're going to grab both of those and uncheck those. And this is the effect we'll be starting with. So we're going to scale it down just a little bit on the X. So let's do 0.9, 0.9. Okay, we're also going to go back to our material here. We're going to turn on emission, and then we're going to set the color of the emission to this kind of bright pink fuchsia color. And we're also going to set the albedo color to the same thing. Then we're going to grab the top bone here, and we're going to flare it out a little bit. So set the X to like 1.3 and the Z to 1.3. And then we want to make this a little taller. So if we grab this top bone and pull this up a little bit like that. Now, this is going to expand for 8 frames and then disappear. So why don't we go to frame 8, and then we will go to the base of this here, and we're going to set the X to 2 and the Z to 2. Maybe a little further. Let's do 2.5. 2.5. Something like that. And you can see as this starts to fan out like this, it gets a little bit flowery, less explosion-like. So what we want to do is go back to our cylinder, and on this frame we want to set the tiling to 0.3, and the offset, we can scroll it down till we get something like this, so maybe around 0.7. And then next thing we want to do is add a frame at the end here on frame 9 where we deactivate the parent object. So that gives us our first little shockwave there. We still need to change the color. So on frame 3, go back to your cylinder. We're going to roll this over to a purple, and we're going to do the same thing with the emission color. Then on frame 6, set it to a dark blue. Same thing with the emission color. And on frame 8, we want it at a teal. These can be really whatever color you want, but it does have to change colors, otherwise it'll be really hard to see the difference between the shock waves. Now we're going to repeat this process with the other two cylinders. We could use the same animation, but I have a feeling we're going to want to tweak these individually, so we're just going to repeat the same steps. Now if you play this, it's starting to get there, but you'll notice there's sort of this weird thing happening at the end here. And that's because they're all facing the same direction, so it creates this kind of after image that gets stuck there. So what we want to do is close our animator window and make sure each of these start at a different rotation. So your second cylinder, you're going to rotate it on the y-axis 90 degrees. So you want to take your third cylinder and rotate that 180 degrees. You can deactivate both of these again. Select our object and go back to the animation window. Now you should see a little bit more of a dynamic effect happening. Okay, now I'm noticing two things I don't really like. First, it feels like the initial frame doesn't really have a lot of impact. And then another thing I noticed, I want the final frames of all of these to be bent out just a little bit more. So I exemplified that first frame a lot more, and I changed some of the colors a bit to roll through faster. They go all the way to green now. And I just generally pulled a few of the timing values around until I got something that looks sort of like this. And I like the way this looks, so I'm going to go with this for now. Next, we want to add a particle effect to this. So go to Game Object, Effects, Particle System. And then we're going to go to our Start Speed and set that to 0. I'm going to position this at 0, 0, 0. We're going to parent it to the Wall Slam VFX. We're going to call this half Starburst. And then we're going to change the shape to a sphere and make its radius 0. So it'll always spawn in the same place. We're going to move it up about here on our character. And then we're going to change the emission to 0 and the bursts to 1. And then we're going to go to our renderer. We're going to create a new material. This is going to be half Starburst particle. And under the shader, we want to go to particles, standard unlit. We're going to have the color be a orange, kind of yellow orange, little white. And we're going to turn on emission. Emission's going to be the same color. And then we want to set it to cut out. And that should be good. Grab our texture, throw it in the albedo here. Then go back to the half Starburst particle effect. And we're going to plug in this under our render material. Now it looks a little weird at first. We're going to check texture sheet animation, and then we're going to do 4 on the X and 2 on the Y. Then we need to adjust our lifetime. So start lifetime, try 1 second, still way too slow. Let's do 0.3. It's okay. It's a little slow still. Do 0.2. Looks about right. We can adjust that later if we need to. Go to your render, and we want to set the max particle size just to 100. Basically, that will just shrink the particle when the camera gets close to it. We don't want that, so we're just going to set it to something really high. Then we want to go to start size, set that to 5. Not quite. So you can see the effect is really not on our cursor here. So we can change that. If we go to pivot under renderer and we set the Y to 1, it's too high, maybe 0.5. It's okay. Let's try 0.4. That looks about right. Now we're just gonna move it down a little. Maybe a little more. I think we could probably make this a little bigger as well. Let's go start size 6. Maybe even bigger than that. 7. That looks about right. Then you can go ahead and apply overrides just to incorporate this into the prefab. And then we want to make sure we have looping unchecked, and we can deactivate this. We want to go back to our animation, and we want to make sure that on our first frame we activate the half starburst effect so that it plays. You won't see that in here, but you can kind of preview it if you pick a frame and do that. The last thing we're going to do is go to Game Object, Effects, Particle System, and we're going to parent this to the Wall Slam VFX. We're going to call this Dust. And this is going to be the little poofs of dust you saw in the effect at the bottom of the character. So first set the rotation to 0. Position can be 0, 0, 0. And then we're going to go to shape. We're going to do a circle. And we're going to change the rotation of the circle to 90. And then I have an effect that I made. It's very similar to this sprite sheet here, except it's dust. So if you use a similar process to animate an effect like this, you can get a little white puff of dust. You could also probably just use, I think in Smash Bros. They're actually using just a singular image, but I think it'd be nice if it was animated. So this is a texture animation, and it's 5 by 3. And then the lifespan is going to be much shorter than that. Maybe 0.5, maybe even 0.3 would do it. And then for emission, we want to spawn all of them at once. So add a burst. We're going to do, I think they have about 8. It's about right. Then we want to lay these out pretty evenly. So we're going to do a burst spread. That's good. And then we're going to change the rotation of these a little bit. So start rotation, random between 2 constants. And we'll just do 360 degrees. So there, you got a little dust. Why don't we make them a little bigger? So start size, how about 1.5? It's better. And same thing with this. We just want to go to overrides, apply all, deactivate it, make sure it doesn't loop. And then we're going to go to window animation in here, hit the record button, activate the dust on the first frame, and that should do it. So let's see how this looks. So this is the roguelite we're working on. It's called Rolling Rogues, and it has a lot of wall slam effects, just like Smash Bros. So that's our effect, and it's looking pretty good. It looks like everything is firing correctly. Okay, so let's see if we can get a freeze frame of this just to make sure it's looking okay. So part of the reason it's tilting vertically so much is because we have it set to a billboard. But if we do a vertical billboard, now we're gonna get a lot less intersection. So that's something I forgot. And then I'm also noticing that our smoke effect is a bit low. It's sort of in the ground. It's pretty small. And maybe it's triggering a little too early. So why don't we try changing that? So this is the final effect. I pulled the dust out of the ground and I made it come out later. I also changed the color of the Starburst animation to the same color as the cylinder impact frame. I just like how it sort of unified everything a little bit. And then I changed the Starburst billboard from vertical to a regular billboard, but I made it face locally. This allows it to rotate. For instance, when I hit the cow against a wall instead of the floor, it can be displayed sideways. I also made it two-sided just in case it flips all the way around. And that's it. So let's take a look at a freeze frame of this. Here's our impact frame. And you can see I made the Starburst a lot bigger. And it kind of combines with this purple of the cylinder now. No puff smoke yet. Really big impact frame, so nice and juicy. And then right here, the little puffs come out. And that's the effect. So here it is, side by side with the original. It looks pretty similar. I took a few creative liberties, but I think it gets the same feeling across. In slow motion, you can see our dust lasts a little longer. And there's no screen shake, so maybe we'll add that eventually. But overall, I'm really happy with how it came out. Okay, that's it. So please like, subscribe, hit that bell notification icon. If anyone has any questions, feel free to comment. I answer pretty much every comment. I'm also going to leave a link to our Discord in the description. You can join, playtest our game, ask us game dev questions. We're pretty much always in there, so please come by and hang out. Thanks for watching, everybody.